everybody, welcome to my channel, or welcome back. My name is Ashlyn and I'm so excited that you are here today. Today's video, as you can see, is not going to be something that I typically do. I usually don't do storytime videos. I usually don't sit down and do videos. I very much do like vlogs, grocery hauls, cleaning, cooking, stuff like that. Very much lifestyle things. I feel like what I'm going through is not really talked about, especially like in the media. I really want to make this video to spread awareness and to show anyone that's going through like what I'm going through that you're not alone, because for the longest time I thought that I was crazy and that I was like everything was in my head and I was making this up. I will kind of make my whole COVID story short because it's not really that relevant to what happened after, but I'm gonna just go ahead and start kind of like where I think the story should start. As a kid, I never really got sick. I just remember growing up, I was kind of like a hypochondriac, and I never wanted to get sick, and I just hated the idea of being sick. Like, being sick just made me like so nervous. I just absolutely hated it. With that being said, I just wanted to emphasize that I was pretty healthy up until this point. I have some digestive issues that I'm going through, but other than that, like heart-wise and everything, like I have been perfectly fine prior to this. Besides that, I had to stop filming because my dog decided to eat his treat that he's had out for hours now, right when I sit down to film. When COVID broke out, I was about to get married. I got married in July of 2020, and then I moved in with my husband, and we stayed COVID free for quite some time. That takes us to August of 2021, and I finally got COVID. At the moment, I was like, man, I feel like COVID didn't really hit me hard, but now that I look back on it, COVID hit me pretty hard. I was in bed for a while. Every time I got out of bed, I was super dizzy, and I think these things kind of correlate with, like, I feel like the whole aftermath. But when I had COVID, it was a lot of like digestive issues for me, and a lot of shortness of breath and dizziness, especially like when I got up. And I expected myself to recover like pretty fast because I was 20 years old, I was healthy, I ate good, I worked out every day. I did all these things to make sure that my health was like at the best it could be. But even that, I to this day have never really recovered from COVID. I was in bed for 10 days because my job, that's what they gave me. They gave me 10 days off, and then they expected me to come back. But after those 10 days, I knew something was wrong, and I felt it, because I think it was like day 9, I finally was able to get out of bed, but our bedroom was upstairs. And I just remember anytime I went to go upstairs, I was just so out of breath, and it took me quite some time to get back into like my normal self. I had to take a break, catch myself, and then continue. And so I remember on day 9, I was like, okay, maybe I should take a walk around our neighborhood, because like I haven't gotten out of bed in so long, and the only time I got out of bed was to go down the stairs to get food and then go back up. My husband at the time was working 4 days on, 4 days off. So when I first got sick, I didn't really get that much help until they made him come home and quarantine, because he, potentially could have it. So I just remember days 9 and 10, I was like, man, I gotta go back to work. But I definitely did not feel good. Like, I was dizzy every time I stood up. I was really out of breath, and I just remember my heart rate being super high, which I didn't really catch that till later on, but I remember now my heart rate just being very high and very like hard, like I could feel it. And I kept hearing people that even after months their body was still like fighting off stuff, and people have been coughing ever since they got COVID and all this stuff. So I just kind of thought to myself, well, maybe like this is just kind of like all in my head, or maybe this is just like what's been normal for COVID. I remember calling my boss and I asked for more days off because I just did not feel myself, and I was like hoping that that would only last a few days or even a few weeks, so that like my body could like fully recover from COVID. When I ended up going back to work, I still felt the same. I would wake up every morning super drained, super lightheaded, dizzy. I felt like I was going to pass out if I pushed myself too hard. My heart rate was, not where it's supposed to normally be. I had chest pain, and it was honestly the scariest thing I've ever been through, because I went through this period where I feel like anytime I stood up, I was gonna pass out. Like, I kind of got that fuzzy feeling in my head, and then I kind of just felt really light. Like right when you're about to pass out, when you get like really light and you feel like you have no control kind of over your body. I felt like that. And like I mentioned, my husband worked 4 days on, 4 days off. So when that quarantine period was over, he had to go back to work, and I was just by myself, and I had to take care of myself. And it definitely was hard because most of the time I laid down in bed until I went back to work. I just stayed home. I laid on the couch all day, watched TV. And the only time I really did anything was to take care of my dog, and then I would lay back down. I remember one day I was at work, and I had told them that I wasn't be able to come in that day because I just felt so sick. My manager convinced me to come in because she said we were really short-staffed, and I was like, okay, you know, like maybe I should come in, maybe. I'm just like, this is kind of all in my head. And so I went to work, and about an hour into my shift, I nearly fainted. So they sent me back home, and I just remember that day like calling my mom and just bawling my eyes out, telling her how I felt. It had been a little bit since I recovered from COVID, and I just remember being so frustrated because I couldn't do anything. I was stuck at home, and I couldn't even work my job, and I was worried that I was going to get fired because I was not able to work and I wasn't able to do my day-to-day things, and I was just so frustrated. And luckily we lived in Omaha at that time, and I had family that lived in Iowa that was about 2.5 hours away, and they came to take care of me, my grandma and my cousin. And honestly, I don't think I could ever repay them back for that. I was so grateful that they were able to come and take care of me, because I feel like that was really the turning point where I realized that I wasn't able to take care of myself, and I wasn't able to do things on my own unless like my husband was home. They stayed for the night. My grandmother had to go back to work the next day, so she stayed the night, took care of me, got me food because I hadn't eaten for a while, because like I said, anytime I got up I just felt like I was gonna pass out, and I know that eating probably would have helped, but at the time I also had really bad anxiety because I didn't know what I was going through, and I did not want to eat. Like the last thing I wanted to do was eat. So I just was not feeling myself, and I knew that within the coming days I was gonna have to go back to work, and I was super nervous about it. And so I think at that moment I realized that I needed to go to the doctor, because this whole time I kind of just pushed myself into thinking, oh, maybe it's just post-COVID stuff, like, you know, that everyone goes through. But after like going to work and stuff and talking to people, I realized that that's not normal, or it hasn't been normal for a lot of people. So I pushed work off for a few days. I asked for more days off because I just couldn't bear it. I couldn't do anything. So I finally went to my primary care physician, and I told him what was going on. And honestly, he didn't really seem that concerned, you know, because like I said, everyone was having post-COVID troubles, and he kind of just chalked it up to that, just saying that I needed to just kind of get used to it, and that over time it would go away, and that COVID is a fairly new thing, so not everyone's gonna know how long it takes everyone to recover. And I was kind of satisfied with what he was saying, because it made me feel better, because I knew that like what I was going through, or I had an idea of what I was going through, it wasn't really concerning to my doctor. So I just kind of pushed it off, and I was like, well, maybe over the next few days I'll feel better. One night I had chest pain, and I just was not feeling myself again, like all the things that I just mentioned. And I was telling my husband, and I was like, you know, if I don't feel better by tomorrow morning, that I'm gonna go to an urgent care and just get like another doctor's opinion to see like what it could be. I went to the urgent care the next morning, and they were like, well, you know, we can't really do much for you here. We suspect that you might have a blood clot, so we just advise that you go to the ER. So I went to the hospital that was right by our house, and once I went in there and told them like what was happening, of course they rushed me back into a room, because when you mention chest pain or anything like that, they were gonna take it seriously. So they told me to take all my clothes off. They did an EKG, they did blood work to test for a blood clot, and I was only there for about an hour or two. They hooked me up to an IV for fluids so that I could get my heart rate down, because my heart rate was also high. And so everything came back normal, and the doctor basically said the same thing. COVID is something that is new, and not everyone's gonna know how it's going to affect other people. They did find it odd that for my size and how active I was and my age, that I was dealing with this, because they said a lot of people that they saw that had complications were older, like 60 and above. So they were kind of concerned about my age, but not concerned enough to keep me. They were like, well, after this you're just gonna have to follow up with your doctor and like give it some time and see how you do. And so 2 days go by and I was sitting at my house, and I think I went to work that day and I just did not feel good. And so after my shift, I came home and I realized that my heart rate was like it was like from 90 to 120. Like it kept jumping up and down from there. And I just remember I was sitting on the couch and I was like, I've been sitting on the couch ever since I got off from work. I was sitting on my couch for about an hour. And my husband was at work, of course, because I feel like everything that happens, he's not home. And I texted him and I was like, I just feel like something's not right. I think we should go back to the ER. So we go back to the ER and I have the same doctor check me out, which of course I knew that was going to happen. So I go back and it's the same doctor, and he was a little bit more concerned this time. And he was like, well, maybe we need to do like a CT scan and check for a blood clot again, because like maybe we missed something. So I can't remember if it was that. I think they did a CT. They injected me with that iodine fluid stuff that like makes you feel like you're gonna pee yourself. That's what I did. And so they did all that, and they did a few more tests, and they had me hooked up to the heart monitor to watch my heart rate. And of course my heart wanted to be fine when I was at the hospital. So after all of that, the doctor was like, we've done so many tests on you and we've done a lot of blood work and you're perfectly healthy, everything's normal. And I knew that was going to happen because I knew that I didn't feel good, but I just, at the same time, I knew that it wasn't going to be something that I feel like people were going to be able to catch. So he basically told me the same thing. He said, I think you should get referred to a cardiologist. I think you should go talk to someone about it. You know, like this isn't normal, but at the moment we can't keep you at the hospital because there's nothing like life-threatening going on. So we left the hospital and I was so embarrassed because I was just so tired of like doctors and people telling me that it was, you know, not in my head, but it's something that I needed to get over and something that would take time, because at that moment I did not have time. Like I had a job, my husband was gone a lot. Over time, I am slowly getting better. Like every day I can feel myself getting a little bit stronger, but at the same time, the problems were still there. Went back to my doctor, my family doctor, and I told him about going to the hospital and I think I should get referred to a cardiologist, like what was his opinion. And he told me, he was like, hey, I feel like you don't need a cardiologist. I feel like that this is just post-COVID syndrome and that you're gonna get over it. But he said, if you feel like you need to see a cardiologist, I can refer you because like you have the means to go see one. So it was around September. I remember it was like 2 days after my birthday. So September 28th, I went to the doctor. I had just turned 21. I went to the cardiologist and I told him what was going on and like how all of this happened after COVID, and that my heart rate was high and that I'm always dizzy and out of breath. And he definitely looked more concerned, and I was actually happy that that was happening. Like obviously I don't want him to have concerns, but I want to be taken seriously because I kind of felt like this whole process I wasn't being taken seriously. He was like, can you come in next week for a stress test? And I was like, of course, I will literally do whatever I can to get myself better. So basically a stress test is they have you on a treadmill and you just walk, and they monitor your heart rate, your heart rhythm, and your blood pressure to see like what's going on. At around 5 minutes, the doctor, she was like, okay, you can stop now. And so she told me, she was like, I noticed your heart rate reached 170 just walking for 5 minutes. And I was like, oh my gosh. Like I remember before I got COVID, when I used to run, my heart rate used to be 170. So just walking for 5 minutes, my heart rate got that high. And she was like, I think we should put you on a beta blocker. She put me on metoprolol, 25 milligrams, cut it in half, and then do in little in the morning, 1 in the morning and 1 at night, because like doing it all at once would have been really hard on my body, because for weeks now my heart rate has been high and then it's gonna be pushed low. And I also had problems with PVCs. So PVCs is a premature ventricular contraction, and so your ventricle is beating before it should, and so it kind of feels like your like heart skips a beat. Before I got my stress test a little bit, I just noticed that those would happen every now and then. It wasn't anything to really be concerned about, but I noticed that over time they were becoming more and more. And so I told her about those, and she expressed that someone my age, a woman, you know, that's 21 years old, it's not abnormal for them to have that with their hormones fluctuating and growing and all that good stuff. And so she said the metoprolol should help a little bit with those. And so I was excited to get on medication. I was excited that she diagnosed me with inappropriate sinus tachycardia. While I was on the stress test, she didn't notice any rhythm abnormalities. So she was excited about that, and she, you know, kind of reassured me that it's okay to be put on this medication and that it's definitely going to help me, and that she felt like it was going to be the best thing for me. And of course, she always gave me options to not take it or whatever, and she honestly was like my favorite. I miss her so much. She was amazing, and I feel like she was the only doctor I really talked to that validated how I felt. And you know, she really helped me go through this and feel like I was normal, and she actually listened to me and like just reassured how I was feeling. And so I got on the metoprolol. It took me a while to get used to it, but after about taking it for a few days, my heart rate was finally down, and I was just so excited because I was starting to feel normal again. I definitely was not 100%, but I definitely felt not as tired, not as out of breath, not really like I was going to pass out that much. I did have my days here and there, but the medicine literally, it helped me so much. Like, it saved my life in a way. And so I would go back to my cardiologist every month just for a checkup. And I remember over time, like I said, those PVCs were increasingly getting more and more. And so when I came to her one visit, I told her about them. And she was like, well, let's put you on a Holter monitor and see, you know, how often you're having these and if they're actually PVCs or if it's like something else. And so I wore the monitor for 2 weeks, and it came back that I had a PVC burden of less than 1%. And a burden is like, let's say you have like 1 million or something like beats per day. It sees how many beats you have that are abnormal and then gives you a percentage. And less than 1% is super, super small, even though you still have them. And at the time, she recommended nothing really to change. Obviously, I could change some lifestyle things, stay more hydrated, eat better, and be more active. At the end of the day, it was really nothing to be concerned about. And every doctor that I've talked to has told me that PVCs, as long as your heart structurally is fine, you have no problem with PVCs. At the end of the day, she told me my percentage was too low to really do anything, and that if I needed to up my metoprolol, I could. So I started taking 125 milligram in the morning and then 1 at night, and I feel like that helped a little bit. So a few more months go by, and I definitely feel better, but I feel like my PVCs are increasing, and I'm still feeling like dizzy every now and then, lightheaded. I still have not got rid of my shortness of breath. It has been since August 2021, and today I still am short of breath doing some of the littlest things, and honestly every day can be a challenge. Every day is different. Some days I feel fine, some days I feel horrible. I still kind of get like that passing out feeling, and it's honestly, it's not fun. A few months go by, and now it is summer of 2022, so this past summer, and my husband and I are moving to Italy. We're here now, but at the time we were moving, just remember, this was back in June, I was being stupid and I was making a TikTok, and it was to where I would have to like jump around a lot. I just remember I sat down after doing that, and I had so many PVCs in a row, and I was scared because I went from having maybe a few PVCs a week to having like 20, 30 in a row. And so I remember going to the garage telling my dad, I was like, I feel so lightheaded, like my heart's not doing something right, like, and it's never happened to me before, and I was so scared. I felt like that was so odd because it had never happened before, and it was honestly really scary to go through that. And so at the time, I was staying with my family in Texas because we were moving, and our whole PCS process was horrible moving overseas. So I'd stay with my family for a little bit, and I had no cardiologist. Like, I was not back in Omaha where I had my normal doctor. I really didn't have any doctor, and I was just scared to death. I was like, what the heck is going on? Like, why did this all of a sudden happen? And so after about a month, I was like, well, maybe I should go see a doctor. Like, maybe this isn't normal. And so I went to the cardiologist that my grandma sees, and I told him what was happening, that like every day I was kind of getting an episode of PVCs, and it's never happened like that before. I gave him the whole spiel, basically what I was telling you like right now in this whole video, and he kind of told me the same thing, that I shouldn't worry about it, that, you know, PVCs are kind of like normal in a way. He asked me if I had an echo done before, and I was like, no, I've never had an echo. And so he's like, well, I suggest we get an echo done for you. So I got my echo done and it came back normal. So he basically told me there was nothing to worry about, and that these PVCs are more of just a burden and kind of an inconvenience and uncomfortable than something to really worry about. It would be more of like a worrisome if I started like passing out or being really symptomatic with them. But since I was fine and I was healthy, he just told me not to really worry about them. Right after I went to the doctor back in Texas, I remember going home, and I absolutely love Facebook groups. I've talked about them before on my channel, but I absolutely love them. And so I was just kind of curious. I was like, what if there is like a heart group? I did find 2 groups, and it literally, I think from that moment on, my whole journey of being diagnosed with this arrhythmia and everything, I feel like has just gotten so much better. I will link those groups down below. They are amazing. Everyone in there has some sort of heart abnormality. I just absolutely love that group. Anytime I had a bad day or anything, I feel like I could always go to that group and feel comforted, because I saw thousands of other people that were dealing the same thing that I did, and a lot of them got sick like I did after COVID, and they like to have conversations in there and talk about like what happened to them when they start having PVCs, what they do to help them, you know, just stuff like that. And it honestly is so comforting to see that so many other people are like going through what I'm going through. And like, I'm not saying that like I'm glad that they're sick, but I'm glad that I finally found a group that I can identify with that was going through the same health problems as me. Because if you're watching this and you have PVCs and PACs, they suck. I feel like my mental health honestly is more impacted by my heart issues, because the doctors, you know, like I said, they tell me all the time that this is something that is not going to hurt you physically, but mentally, the anxiety that I get, and that's like why I also just have a problem going out. Like, I have an anxiety of going out in public and something happening to me. I have anxiety about working out and something happened to me. Every time I take my dog on a walk, I tell my husband that I'm leaving, and when I come back, because if something happens to me while I'm out on my walk, like, I want him to know. And I just feel like the constant anxiety, like, no one understands that. Like, no one understands, unless you have a heart arrhythmia, how it actually is and how it can affect you mentally. Like, I feel like I've never been so mentally strained until I started going through this. And it's so unfortunate to say, because like I said, I feel like a lot of doctors don't take us seriously. They don't take this seriously. And I'm just glad that I found the group, because those 2 groups have been amazing to me. The people in there are always super sweet, and I'm just super glad that I kind of like found my people. So if you want, check those groups out. I will link them down below. Absolutely amazing. Finally, I made it here with my husband. I finally got to Italy, and still to this day, every single day, I get about an episode of PVCs, and it scares the crap out of me every single time. And I'm in the process right now of getting referred to a cardiologist here in Italy, because the increasing PVCs, my primary care physician said he feels like, and I feel like, should get checked out, because like, they could put me on a different medication. They could try to figure out if this is something else. Here I am today. I deal with PVCs, like I said, every day. And it's really not fun. And hopefully I'm going to get another Holter monitor soon, since my PVCs, since they're happening more often, they just want to see if my burden has gotten any worse, if they need to switch my medication, like what they need to do. And I know a lot of y'all are probably going to ask if I've been tested for POTS. POTS, I forgot what it's standing for. POTS is it's a nervous system condition that basically, like, your heart and your head, your nervous system from your heart and your head, they don't communicate correctly, and so it can result in faintingness, dizziness, shortness of breath, chest pain, fast heart rate. Everything basically that I just explained can happen when you have POTS. I'd love to get tested for POTS, but after getting diagnosed with IST, I just feel like I didn't really need to. I could totally have POTS and not know it. I will also link this YouTube channel down below called Cardiology. If you don't know them, it is an amazing doctor. He has his own YouTube channel. He explains everything about the heart, POTS, arrhythmias, like anything you need to know, and it is so comforting to watch him because he explains it so well. And like if you don't have a good doctor, he literally could be like your doctor through YouTube. He is absolutely amazing, and I have honestly learned more through him than I have going to doctor's appointments and stuff. And I'm not blaming that on my doctors. I'm just saying that like I could go watch his YouTube channel whenever I want to. I can't go to the doctor whenever I want to. I still get days where I feel super dizzy. I'm still out of breath a lot. I get PVCs every day. My heart rate still gets a little bit high. I haven't started working out yet because I am too scared, and my doctor just told me to be cautious because, you know, of what I'm going through. And honestly, I just try to live day by day, and I just try not to let this get to me mentally because it is so draining. And like if you're going through the same thing that I'm going through, you can understand like why it's mentally draining. And like it's just so frustrating that none of this happened until I had COVID. Like I ask my doctors all the time, like, what do you think it caused this? And none of them have a for sure answer, but a lot of them think that it's COVID because all this happened right after I had COVID. So I don't know if it had something to do with the virus in my nervous system, if it had something to do with the virus in my heart. I honestly have no idea. But to me, it's just frustrating that I was a healthy 21-year-old, and I had never really been sick in my entire life. And until I got COVID, I was healthy, and then everything has just kind of gone downhill since then, unfortunately. And I hope that me making this video has really helped out some of y'all if you're going through this, because trust me, you're not alone. I felt like I was going crazy throughout the whole thing. I had to quit my job and get a different job that was more sedentary. I feel like my family and friends for a while probably thought I was crazy. I know that this affects my husband every day because there's some days where, like I said, I feel perfectly fine, and then there's some days where I feel like I'm about to pass out and I can't really go upstairs without getting out of breath. I can't really go on long walks. And now that we live in Europe, it's just so frustrating because a lot of Europeans walk, and a lot of the things that you do here involves walking. If you're watching this and you're going through the same thing I'm going through, it is not your fault, and don't feel guilty about having to alter your lifestyle, because after all this, I had to completely alter my lifestyle. I always leave my socials down below. Please feel free to message me on Instagram. You're not alone, you're not crazy, and that there are so many other people out there that are going through the same thing that you're going through. I want to thank you so much for watching this video, and if this helped you, please give it a thumbs up. Please subscribe if you like this video, and please subscribe if you want to see my normal content that I usually do here living in Italy with my husband, and I will catch y'all next week. Thank you so much, guys. Bye. Don't forget to drink your water.